This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to episode 18 now of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast, and because of a cold snap last weekend there were only 3 games which took place, and we'll have a look at them in a minute. This Saturday it's a standby date for the Premiership, but the national divisions from 1 to 4 has pretty much a full fixture card, so plenty to talk about in today's programme, and as usual Dale Clancy is with me. So let's quickly go over the games from last weekend. Won't take long. They didn't include the 2 games from the Premiership. Glasgow Hawks v Kelso was called off just after 9 a.m. on Saturday, but the Currie match at Malleny Park against Hawick, well, that was pulled around an hour before kick-off.
In the past, we've always seen some games have been called off the night before, some are called off last minute, and it's just the nature of the beast, I think, and that'll really irk Hawick. Obviously to go that distance against a potential title rival as well, and they'll feel a little bit mugged off, but it's just the nature of it. You can't predict the weather. It's unfortunate, and they were probably hoping. Even I went out a walk, believe it or not, yes, a bit of exercise. Went out a walk on Saturday, and I thought in the morning when I looked at the way that the kind of forecast was going, I thought it's not going to be deep enough, that frost, to call off many games. There wasn't many games on, but even when I was walking across the turf at Hay Lodge, it was still pretty hard, and that was kind of back at 2. You've still got to give it a chance. You want to see the games played, but yeah, the unfortunate thing is the other side of that. It's the expense of a bus for nothing. But hey, that's where they are, and it's unfortunate the game was called off overall. Well,
2 games survived in National 1, Ayr 12, Highland 10, and Biggar 21, Gala 14. Ayr still unbeaten, but survived a late scare with a missed penalty towards the end from Highland, which would have taken Ayr's unbeaten record. So pretty close on that one. Biggar, on the other hand, they leap over Gala in the table with 5 wins and a draw now after a very bad start to the season.
Yeah, I think, obviously it was a tighter game between Ayr and Highland. And it was a game that had been built up for a few weeks until Highland did fall off the form that they were showing early on. So, great that it was still a competitive game, and it does allude to the fact that Ayr can be tested at times. But again, just being able to pull out that result. Again, you asked me last week about who I thought was going to win that game between Biggar and Gala, and for once in my life, I believe I was correct, because I did think Biggar in tricky conditions at home were going to be difficult to try and beat, and they got off to a really good start. Gala then came back into it and made a game of it, but again, Biggar just able to scrape through with that victory. And you've alluded to it. We did say, even at the start of the season, we thought Biggar were going to be there or thereabouts in terms of the top half of the table. I don't think we could have predicted the form that Ayr were going to be in, but Biggar have been a surprise because they were so poor at the start. But it's nice to see a club of their ilk go on a bit of a run, pick up some victories, and it has made it a pretty much a 2-horse race to see who's going down.
And if they continue to do that, another 2 or 3 wins, all of a sudden they could be second or third.
It all comes into thinking about, a lot of these teams in this division. You think about your Glasgow Accies, your Melrose, your Gala, GHK as well, perhaps Watsonians. These teams for a long time have started thinking about next season. Biggar probably weren't in that position until the last few weeks because they didn't know where they're going to be playing the rugby next season. Now it's pretty safe that they're still going to be in that one. But that sort of form, if they can continue that on, it just attracts a little bit more of a positive culture at the club, can get some players in. That's the same. You replicate that in any club. You think about Melrose, for example, and we've been very high in praise of them at some times, and we've been very critical as well. But if you can go on that run and start to attract the right type of player and the right type of culture, I think National 1 will be a lot more competitive next year.
Well, we were going to be covering the Glasgow Hawks Kelso game. That was called off, obviously, and then we were looking at the Border League fixture, Selkirk against Peebles. That was called off, so we decided just to go down and to Malleny Park and watch Currie against Hawick. Got within a mile, and this text comes through from Gary Muir, the team manager of Hawick, to say the game is off. So that coincided with us seeing a sign saying Biggar 24 miles, and off we trotted. Just got there before kick-off. First time at Hartree Mill. I've never been there before, and it was a well-supported club. It was the right decision to play as well. There were some frosty bits on there, but generally it was more sticky and clammy than anything else. Gala didn't seem to get off the bus in the first half, and Andrew Jardine scored an interception try which made it 18-0 at the break. You always felt that Gala were going to have a real rollicking at half-time and come out fighting, which they did, and they could easily have won that game. But it was nice to go to a new club which I'd never been to before, so great to at least get something out of last weekend.
You know, playing for Peebles, that was your local rival. You know, obviously we were in the borders. They're not. They're just on the outskirts. But it was always a good Boxing Day clash, or in between Christmas and New Year. And there's a lot of good connections between the two clubs. And, you know, I joke sometimes, you were saying, when I seen a sign saying bigger 24 miles, you wanted that number to reduce. I would want it to increase if I was, on the road. But, you know, you say those things about bigger, but they are a really well-run club. Like, rugby, for me, in terms of, I've said it time and time again, in terms of the community and what they bring to an area, it's the best place to learn a lot of lessons in life. And bigger, by their nature and their location, you know, they're so well supported. They've got, you know, a big agricultural background there as well, and, you know, it's the beating heart of their town at times. Really well supported, difficult place to travel. They've invested a lot of money in the place. You know, they've been able to put a lot of money into that club and make some good improvements. And, you know, there's times they've been flying high. They've been in the Premiership, and Peebles and Bigger kind of passed like ships in the night at times and took their place at the top table. They're now trying to fight to get back into a similar position, but they're a well-supported club. I do like Bigger as a rugby club, and I do say things tongue-in-cheek because of the rivalry, but, you know, I've got a lot of admiration for Bigger as a rugby club as a whole.
Good to see them coming into some form, and they've got fantastic Wi-Fi down there as well, which means that hopefully in the future we'll end up at Bigger doing a commentary match, and that would be great. The only other game played was Allen Glens 13, Howe 521. That's a huge blow for Allen Glens. Howe coming from being 13 points down, I think, at one stage, to take that one and move within a point of their hosts, although Allen Glens have that game in hand over them. But they're now 11 points shy of Preston Lodge at the top of the table, and I can't see them making that gap up with the remaining 5 matches.
We spoke about it last week in terms of it being a big game. Howe and Allen Glens in similar positions at the table. Howe Fife had been through those games against the promotion chasers and had come up short on a couple of occasions, so it was probably a bigger game for Allen Glens. They were at home, you know, they had the advantage, and they've come off second best, not able to pick up anything from that game. You know, Howe Fife doing well to star them of any points in terms of in the league table. So yeah, I think that conversation for me in terms of who's going up from National 3 has narrowed slightly after last weekend. I think the focus now is on the kind of the jostle between Orkney and Preston Lodge to see who's going to escape that division.
That match at Penny Pit, and we were talking about Wi-Fi a minute ago. That's the place that really does need Wi-Fi, and then we could go down there and cover the match, but the last time we were there, unfortunately, we just couldn't get a strong enough signal. It's just one of those things, but maybe we will get something sorted out for that game, which is coming up in the next few weeks. So will it be Orkney, will it be Preston Lodge who get promotion? Whoever goes up, there's a great story, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. Like Preston Lodge are a well-supported club. They've had a huge say in terms of the way that rugby is in Scotland. You know, over the last few decades, they've managed to bring on a lot of Scottish internationals as well. Where I just think the story about Orkney in itself, I think, is remarkable. That in an era where it's difficult to try and get rugby players on the park, no matter what age they are at the moment, you know, to try and field teams in mainland Scotland is difficult enough, but to put them on a ferry, to bring them across the water onto mainland, to get them to compete in a league campaign, fulfil every fixture as well so far, fulfil your league structure, but also have teams that are competing up towards a team that's competing up towards the top of the league. It's just remarkable, I think, and to think that they potentially could be in National 2 adds another great story to the national picture. You were talking about covering the whole national landscape before we'd concentrated on the border stuff, but as a rugby fan, you've played these teams and you've visited them, and I think when you start looking at all the league campaigns, the different stories that intertwine is really remarkable. It does shine a really great light on all of these clubs in the top 5 divisions.
Well, this week the only games scheduled in the Premiership are Currie versus Hawick, as they try again to get that one played at the 3rd attempt, and Edinburgh Accies against Glasgow Hawks. Now let's start with the Currie v Hawick game, and it's déjà vu as we hear again this week ahead of the same match from the same coach, Green's head coach, that's Matty Douglas.
A little bit frustrated with last weekend and disappointed not to get any rugby. I think the weather played a massive part in that. A lot of games were off, and just a little bit frustrated in the circumstances that our game was postponed. But look, that's rugby. We'll not dwell on it. We've got another trip back up to Malleny Park this week, which is great for us. We don't have to wait a couple of weeks. We can head just straight back up the road, and I think the way we approach this, it doesn't really change. Look, we prepared extremely well last week, and again we got back to work last night, albeit we couldn't train outside, but we've got great facilities at Ian Stark's inside that we're able to, apart from contact, get a full session in, which is obviously grateful to them. They've really pulled us out of hole a couple of times already this season, and we managed to get a quality session in, and I think the weather's hopefully to pick up in the next couple of days. So I think we'll get a session outside on Thursday night, and then all roads lead back to Malleny this weekend, where it's a huge game in context of the season. I stated that last week, and both teams are vying for a home semi-final, and this is the start of our tough run. We have Currie on Saturday, and then we head to Musselburgh, Heriot and Selkirk. So we know what's at stake. Look, we're not we're not taking anything for granted. We know how hard this will be and how hard we're going to have to work, and probably how much our squad depth will be tested. But look, we're obviously missing Jay Linton at the minute through suspension, but Tom Hope and Rudy McLeod will come back into the selection process this week. And we've got a lot of boys training, so we feel we've got a squad there that can deal with 4 away trips on the bounce, and we'll take it head on. Look, we're excited to get going again this week and try and put in a massive performance. Squad selection wise, we'll as I said, we've got Rudy and Tom back in the mix this week to pick from, and everybody's put their hand up last night, so we'll see what we go with this week. But again, it'll be another strong squad heading to Malleny, and we'll just get excited for it. We'll bring lots of energy, and we'll give it our best shot, and hopefully if we can put in a big performance, then we'll get something out of the game and head back down the road.
Matty Douglas, head coach of Hawick, and they'll be trying again to get that fixture played, and Robin Purdy's going to go down again and cover that one for us as well. So same question as I gave you last week, who's going to win?
Well, can you not play back last week and get the same answer? Because I can't remember.
But knowing you, we get a different answer every week.
Yeah, I think you got to look at it. Same as the reverse fixture, actually. Obviously, people weren't happy with my prediction last time, but going into it, you base it on what results have happened. Currie, when they travelled to Mansfield Park, went into it top of the table in a bit of form, playing really well and not conceding a lot of points. You can argue now that Hawick are in the position that they were. So I've got to say that Hawick probably travel to Malleny as favourites. They're top of the table. They've reacted really, really well to the defeat against Marr on the road earlier on this season. And I think we spoke about it earlier in the season quite a lot in terms of how turbulent the results are. It's true for Hawick in terms of how they reacted, and as a club they've reacted brilliantly from that defeat. I think they put in some good performances. They've come through games playing poorly but winning comfortably as well. So they probably go into this game, I would say that Hawick go into favourites. The difficulty is that Hawick have went into this game against Currie before as favourites, and Currie have been able to orchestrate a game that they like to play. You think back to the playoff final, Currie were never at the same level as Hawick, but were able to adopt a game plan which really frustrated Hawick. Now, if they're able to do that at home and not have the misfortune that they did have in the playoff final, then it could be a different result. But it's going to be tight. It's going to be a really challenging game for both sides. But I would say that Hawick start as favourites.
Let's have a look at the Premiership table then. Not much difference, obviously, but it's just to refresh your memory. Hawick at the top, 61. Marr, 57. They've played a game more. Currie, the same amount of games as Hawick, are on 56. Those three well clear. But of course, we're now looking at the fourth playoff spot, and it's getting very interesting. Heriot's Blues 44, Kelso 40, Musselburgh 40, Edinburgh Accies 37, Selkirk 30, Glasgow Hawks 23 and Jedforest 5. So that's the state of play at the moment. Edinburgh Accies will play Glasgow Hawks at Raven Place, and we'll hear the thoughts now of head coach Andy Hill.
Saturday was a real disappointing cancellation, and it was one that kind of really came out the blue. Trained in the Thursday and everything was great. Friday was cold, but I didn't think it was going to lead to frost. So when Kenny called me in the morning to say that the game was looking doubtful and he was having to conduct a pitch inspection, it kind of took us by surprise. Feel as if it's obviously asking more and more of the players, because, as I said previously, that the guys haven't had an organised Saturday off now since probably the start of August. So it's asking more and more of the players, and it's hard, obviously, given just the way things have changed in rugby over the years, that guys to be available for that. But this weekend obviously sees us play against Edinburgh Accies. It's going to look like a much similar squad. We've got a few guys that are away and still unavailable, so some of the positives are that Josh McConkey is back from Ireland and he comes in to start at 12. Callum Ferry comes in onto the bench after us hoping he was going to be available last Saturday for us, but with his inability to train meant that we obviously removed him from our squad. So that's a couple of obviously big hitters that we feel come back into that squad to make it really, really competitive as well. And Craig Nolan moves from the bench into starting with JP Thompson unavailable. We come against Accies, who we know have always been quite a close battle against. It's always been quite an interesting game. They managed to sneak it down at Belgrade the last time we played, so we know it will be a difficult contest through at Rayburn Place. But it's one that we believe that if we get the right performance, the right intensity, we know that we're going to cause Accies problems, and that's what the focus has got to be this weekend, matching them physically, because historically they've been a pretty good defensive outfit, so we know it's going to ask a lot of our attack, but even more so we're going to have to try and make sure that we get on the right side of the defensive stuff by winning the physical battle and winning those collisions. And a big telling thing I think for this weekend will be the set piece. Accies probably get the better of that. The last time they're probably one of the best set piece teams in the league, so we have to come out and make sure that we're secure our own ball within that to try and make sure we give a platform for our backs to strike and try and make sure they can get on the front foot, give us a chance to win that game.
Well, it's a game that Accies must win to keep their Premiership playoff hopes alive, and this will be Hawks' first of 5 games that they still have to play, and of course they sit in 9th place at the moment, but of course we all know that there's no relegation worries. Jedforest already down.
This is obviously a big game for Edinburgh Accies, and it's a tricky one as well, because the Hawks are a team that they can turn on a game. You know, they can play really, really well, but they also blow a bit hot and cold. And I think the difference with Edinburgh Accies this year as well is they're a little bit inconsistent. You know, they find themselves in 7th, a couple of positions above Glasgow Hawks, but they can still squeeze into that 4th place playoff position. But it's going to have to come with a win this weekend. If they don't win, then they've got to hope that one of 3 teams up above them slip up at some point. So, you know, it's a huge game for Edinburgh Accies because they've been there or thereabouts in the last few years, and for them to slip down now and allow the opportunity for not only another Edinburgh team, but potentially a team coming up from National 1 to squeeze into the playoff positions is, would be a bit of a fall from grace from such a big club. So, yeah, huge game for Accies this weekend.
This is the Scottish Club Rugby podcast with Dale Clancy and me, Stuart Cameron. We're going to take a look at National 1 now. No game for either Glasgow Accies or Biggar this week, but let's take a peek at the table as it stands after last week's matches. And as we know by now, at the top of the table, the champions, 15 out of 15. It's Ayr on 72 points, and second place Melrose, and you got a drop there to 44. That's absolutely extraordinary. 28 points difference between Ayr and the second team. That is extraordinary, I have to say. Melrose 44, Highland 41, Glasgow Accies 39, Watsonians 39, GHA 36, Biggar 34, Gala 34. I mean, you know, just 10 points separating from second down to 8th there. And then we have Dundee with 19 and GHK 17 battling out to see who will survive the relegation drop. So it's Dundee v GHA this week, and it's GHK against Highland as the focus obviously turns to the bottom end of the table there. How do you see these going? I mean, on paper, obviously it should be a GHA and a Highland win, but, you know, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, I think you're right with that assumption there, Stuart, in terms of that you would believe that it's going to be an away win in those 2 games, but I think that the message will be pretty clear to both of those clubs, Dundee and GHK, that they need to make home form count. And not only that, they need to pick up some sort of points, because we've said it before, at the bottom of a league table, like, points are at a premium. Like, they don't come around very often, so you need to try and get as many as possible when they're on offer. So there's only 2 points separating both of those clubs. So if you think if one of these teams can pick up a victory, then that could have a huge say in terms of the pressure going on the other club for the rest of the season. But, you know, you've got to think about try bonuses and losing bonuses as well. You know, if GHK can get something from the game and get a better advantage than what Dundee get, then, you know, it continues that pressure and puts the pressure in terms of the points tally on both clubs. So you would say going into the game, GHA and Highland are favourites, but they need to make home form count in that league.
Derby time at Netherdale for Gala versus Melrose. Let's hear from both camps. Ian Chisholm shortly, head coach of Melrose, but first the director of rugby at Gala. It's Ewan Swinton.
Our game at Biggar last Saturday was a bit off and on as we travelled up to Biggar. We went there more in hope and expectation of the game being on, but we arrived fairly early and had a good look at the pitch, and the Biggar boys were out there too, and over the course of a half an hour or so we're concluding that the game should go ahead, and indeed it did. We started off as if we were still on the bus, to be honest. Biggar were well in control in the first half and were good for their lead of 11-0 as half-time approached. Unfortunately, that turned into 18-0 as a result of an interception pass which was thrown just before half-time. So the guys went in feeling that they had quite a bit to sort things out in the second half. They came out for the second half in much better form and scored a couple of good tries through Cammy Pate and Callum Pate in the first 15 or 20 minutes of the second half. And at that point, it really looked as if only one team was going to win the game. However, Biggar regrouped and came back at us and secured the win with a penalty late on, and we ended up with just a single bonus point. That being said, the shortcomings that we had on Saturday were pretty obvious and pretty clear and should be straightforward to rectify. Our kicking game just wasn't up to the required standard, and our line-outs were not accurate. These are both things that the guys can work on for Saturday. So we'll welcome Melrose to Netherdale on Saturday with a good deal of confidence. We will be strong in the forwards. We have guys like Cammy Pate, who is playing fantastically well at the moment. Glenn Brock came back in the second half on Saturday and made a real difference to the game. He really turned things around in terms of the scrummaging and a lot of the breaching in the forwards. He was very, very much on the front foot, so we expect a lot from him on Saturday. He was missing for the Boxing Day game, so looking forward to seeing how he can influence how things go. In the backs, we are uncertain of the lineup as I speak because we are affected by quite a number of injuries. So we'll see what lineup comes out on Saturday, but it will come out confident. We're at home. We are confident that the forwards will do well and the backs will make much better use of the ball that they get. That being said, we know that we're up against a tough side in Melrose. They have excellent halfbacks in the shape of Dougie Crawford and Stuart Hutchison, and they will certainly try to orchestrate the moves to get the better of us. Melrose versus Gala is always a ding-dong battle. It's always fairly ferociously fought. It doesn't matter whether it's for Waverley Cup, whether it's for league points, or whether it's just in the Border League. The two sides will go hard at each other and will provide really good entertainment on Saturday. So what the hope for the game is that a big crowd will come up to Netherdale on Saturday. They'll enjoy the game and then they'll enjoy each other's company afterwards. Melrose and Gala are great rivals, but great friends as well, as it should be in the Borders. We will have a good battle on the pitch and then share some chat afterwards. So looking forward to a great day on Saturday.
We're pretty happy where we are as a group, especially coming off of that Boxing Day result where, first of all, crowd was outstanding. If every club rugby game was like that, rugby would be way more enjoyable, especially in the deep dark winter. But look, on Boxing Day, I felt we deserved to win that game. Felt that we controlled the ball for large parts of the game, and it was really only that 15-20 minutes at the end of the game where maybe ran out of steam a wee bit, and we started kicking out a system, giving them the ball back rather than transferring pressure through a kicking game and a kicking strategy, and that allowed them into the game. And then you look at, we conceded 16 penalties and 7 of them were for high tackles, and that's just giving teams like Gala easy access into our 22, and great going back to back. We've got a really clear idea of what we want to do and what we need to get better at, and if you look back to the first 2 scrums on Boxing Day, we went backwards at a pretty fast rate, and then following that we held onto the ball for probably about 7 minutes altogether with a few stoppages in there and pulled a wee bit of steam out of Gala, and all of a sudden we got a bit of dominance up front. We won a few scrum penalties and we stopped their driving maul, but then still we're beating ourselves all the time through just little offsides, ignoring what the referee's saying to us. And I thought Gordon Glashan had a good game. I thought, it's not very often you're able to speak to a referee, and regardless of who you are, and he tells you what you're doing. And I think he understood the occasion as well, that boys would be het up. So going into this game, there's not an awful lot that we want to change in terms of what we're doing in our half, in terms of what we're doing in their half. We just need to do it better. Squad-wise, we're hoping to be pretty similar. The difficulty for us is, we had a real 23-man effort, and we're now having to drop to 20 players, so there's going to be 3 players that are pretty disappointed not to be involved, and a few players that we need to look out for. Elliot Ruthven, he had a wee injury to his foot. Donald Crawford, he's had the lurgy for about 4 weeks now. Donald's just coming back from that. We're looking at Test 2 against Gala at Netherdale. We haven't won there for since 2018, and the boys counted out last night. It's 1,084 days since Melrose have won at Netherdale. So that's a real strength for Gala, and we want to reset that clock and make sure that we can cling on to second place. But I may be wrong in saying that, not just cling on to second place, but put a bit of distance between us, because look, we know we're good enough. We just need to be consistent and make sure that our effort levels match what the jersey deserves.
So as he was saying, Melrose haven't won at Netherdale since 2018, and that's 6 years ago.
Oh, well done, Rachel Riley. Yes, that was obviously 6 years ago, and a lot's happened in those 6 years, though. I think that if you look back in 2018, it was a time where both clubs were almost at the peak of their powers as well. Since then, a lot has changed. There's been a big change in the landscape of rugby, which is culminated obviously in both teams finding themselves in National 1. So, a lot has changed. It's a slightly different slant on the derby, but it is still Gala Melrose. There's a lot of history that goes behind it in terms of even the evolution of these clubs and how they evolved from the ground up. So it's going to be a feisty occasion. Both teams will leave it all out in the park. But I think the beauty of it now is when you look at both squads, you can argue it is probably a true derby as well. It's a real fabric of Gala and it's a real fabric of Melrose. So it's an interesting game, and it's always one that's well looked out for in the rugby calendar.
And they've played twice this season already, both at the Green Yards. Obviously there was the Waverley Cup, and before that in the league, which was the double header for the Border League as well, Melrose coming out on top of that. So they're actually going for a hat-trick, as well as that first win at Netherdale since 2018. But Gala, of course, looking to turn things around.
Yeah, and Gala have had good home form this year. They've had some sticky results on the road, but they've played really well at home mostly. Against, even you think about teams like Ayr, they drove them all the way in that game and just probably came up short with, probably just running out a bit of puff, really. And I think that's it. Like, Gala do like playing at Netherdale. They find it really comfortable. It's a nice big expansive pitch where they can try and exploit and try and get their open flair type of rugby on display. So it's a difficult one to call. Unless you're playing Ayr in this league at the moment, I think every game's probably quite difficult to really hang your hat on, and especially this one that's been, the results for all clubs has been turbulent, but Gala went and had waves and where they've played really, really well, but they've had drops where they've perhaps underperformed as well, but Melrose have been exactly the same. So it depends who's up for the occasion this weekend will probably result in who's going to be the victor.
And as you say, pre-Christmas they were locked together, Gala and Melrose, and now set one's second and one's eighth. It just doesn't seem to add up, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I think you can look at that league, and there's almost 7 points separating eighth and third. League position itself probably doesn't tell you the full story. I think when you look at it, like every team below Ayr, they've lost at least 5 games. That shows you how difficult this league has been this season for these clubs. They've been really competitive, and I think when I was saying before about National 1 being more competitive next year, I just mean you take Ayr out of it and you put another team in that I think that it is a real level playing field. And really, when Super Series and Super 6 came about, that was the idea, was we wanted to try and make it level again, and National 1 certainly has went that way. The Premiership probably is not far away as well, but there's a gulf between probably your top 4 and your bottom 4, but certainly National 1 minus Ayr has been a cutthroat league this year.
Certainly has. And in the other match in National 1, it's Watsonians versus Ayr. Ayr with 15 straight wins. Highland ran them close last weekend. It'll be very interesting to hear what Ayr's head coach Grant Anderson has to say this week.
Saturday was pleasing from the point of view that we've won. And we've managed to secure 100% home record this season, which was another one of our targets. That was really pleasing for us. I think if you were to ask the players, they were delighted to get the win, and get away with it is maybe how I would put it. Certainly it felt like that a wee bit after the game, with it only being 12-10, but all credit to the boys, the way they approached the game. On the Thursday night, our training had been really focused. All the boys were keen to get going and keen to get back on the pitch, start the year off in the right manner. We had looked at Highland and what they might do, possible threats that they might pose and the way they might look to play against us, and that's exactly what they did. We had a really bright start. Our line-out was functioning well, our maul functioned well, and actually We came close to, if not should have scored 4 tries. So we were held up over the line twice and we scored 2 clear tries. The linesman has flagged for a foot in touch, a dubious foot in touch, let's say. So especially in those first 10 or 15 minutes, we should have maybe scored 3 tries, which have put us, all kicks going well, we'd have been 21-0 up in those first kind of 10 minutes. As a result, those tries were called back, so we ended up being 7-0 up, and maybe a little bit of complacency or frustration maybe entered into our game, and then our discipline didn't really help with that. So I know what it's like, and remember, as a player, when you're frustrated, you maybe force things and try things, and then individuals are moving away from the system and just trying to make something happen. And then when decisions don't go your way, more frustration happens, and then so for us, really, at half time, we were looking for a clear reset to push on and have a much better second half, but ultimately we kind of fell into a similar pattern in the second half, and because the score was quite close, we then decided to kind of maybe force things even more. So delighted to get the win against a good Highland team. I would say that I was bitterly disappointed at the end of the game, which some of the players, they know me well enough now, but some of the players might have disagreed with, had you have asked them. But certainly for me, and for the standards that we've set all season, for the standards that I know the team can play by, and the quality of our attack and defence, what that can look like, I was more just disappointed that we hadn't given a real account of ourselves. Having said that, we'll go to Watsonians at this Saturday, but in a week on Saturday's time, we'll go back up to Highland, and I think I'm glad the games are so close, because it will give us a really good chance to go up there and give a proper account of ourselves. In terms of Highland looking at us, we really didn't show them anything. Our defensive system for me didn't really function at all. We were actually quite soft in defence, which I haven't really said many times this year. And our attack didn't really function the way I like it to. We weren't being brave on the ball, and some of our basic skills let us down, and then just a number of different things. Don't get me wrong, there was a wee bit of rustiness in there from Christmas, which I'm really mindful of, which is why probably I haven't laboured the point. We've taken the win, we've reviewed the game, we've looked at areas where we need to improve, and now we move on to Thursday. But immensely proud to have secured a 100% home record, especially in this league. In this league, when only one team gets promoted, and anyone can beat anyone, and people do beat each other every single week, with everything else that can play its part, with injuries, with boys away on holidays, or family events, or concussion protocols. I'm really delighted to have maintained a 100% home record. We'll go on the road to Watsonians this Saturday, and I'll be looking for a massive reaction to the game that we've just played. I'll be looking for a reaction in terms of our performance and our attitude and our willingness to, defend and be brave in both attack and defence, and ultimately our commitment to the system. It's something we talk about a lot at training, about commitment not to the club, but actually commitment to the systems that we're trying to do on the pitch. So rather than throwing that miss pass that might look good and look fancy, just executing a 3-on-2 with simple hands, doing the right things at the right times, and playing within the structure, because we've learned now, or we should know by now, that when we play in that structure and we play with our power game, then we usually end up falling on the right side of where we want to be. So I'm looking forward to the reset, the opportunity to go again this Saturday, and ultimately we want to come away with a victory.
So Grant Anderson, always good to hear what he has to say. They just got over the line, but that's all you need to do.
Yeah, I think, no matter what game Ayr have played this season, he looks at it in great detail and looks at the fine margins and looks at key moments in the game. And I think he's always got a really great insight, Grant Anderson. He comes with a lot of experience from the club game. He's obviously implementing that in Ayr and getting that culture. So whether they win by 98 points or whether they win by 2 points, I don't think that there's a different approach at any time. He's always looking at ways that they can improve on and areas that they've perhaps shone on as well. So, sometimes he's probably prouder in games that they manage to squeeze over the line as opposed to just brushing opponents aside. But yeah, again, another good weekend for Ayr. We probably thought at Millbrae it might have been a little bit more comfortable, but they do have a few games left to try and get home for an unbeaten season.
Yes, and they're all away from home. Watsonians on the 13th of January, this Saturday, away at Marr side. Then it's GHA, who of course ran them very, very close at Millbrae, so that could be an interesting one the week after. And then the end with Highland away on the plastic pitch at Canal Park. Well, let's turn to Division 2 now, and that's where we find our featured game on Saturday between table toppers Peebles and Newton Stewart in third spot, 5 points adrift, and Newton Stewart have played one more game than Peebles. Here's Peebles head coach Graham Patterson, and he had this to say ahead of the game.
It seems like ages since we last stepped onto a pitch for a competitive game. And it is looking like about 4 weeks now since we played last week, and that pretty exciting finish to 2023 for us competitively. So yeah, it was disappointing to not get that game against Selkirk last week due to the weather. It was just unfortunate that the frost came in on the Friday night. It has allowed us some refreshing of the bodies. It has also allowed us to introduce a couple of new ideas and a couple of new tools, hopefully, to the toolkit for the players to select when they get onto the pitch. And we hastily rearranged a training session for last Saturday in place of the game. Hopefully, and I'm pretty sure of this, that this break will make the players hungry. They're playing for a lot, so this stepping back into the field should see a real desire and bite, hopefully, about the players, which I'm confident will come through on Saturday. And it's a key game, obviously. Newton Stewart are up there competing as well, and it's probably their last throw of the dice in terms of looking for that one promotion spot. So if we can knock them out of that equation, that really helps and does make it really a two-horse race from then on in, probably, with ourselves and Falkirk. So yeah, we're really clear that we have a goal. That goal is to get promotion. We're taking each game as it comes, as they come along, but ultimately our goal for the end of the season is to be the winners of the National 2 and next year compete in National 1. So that's quite clear from the playing group and from the club now as well. We're very much supported by them in achieving that success, hopefully. So it's going to be a great opportunity to get the club back into the National 1 level, and it's enthusing the players and the supporters. It gives us opportunity to really drive our ethos now in the club. So it's not about recruitment of players, it's about retention of all those youth players that we're developing from within the club and allowing us to keep them at the appropriate level. And that's going to be far easier if we're playing at that National 1 level and giving them the real opportunity to play at a good level of rugby, which is required for their development as well. So the squad is fairly healthy to pick from, as you'd expect after a number of weeks off. We've got some agreements with the academy and conversations with Bert Gregg at the academy with regards to some inter-district under-18 games this weekend. So both Ross Wolfenden and Callum McRobert will be available to us on Saturday to pick them as well around their good conversations around about their minutes, how much game time they've got, what their individual development needs are, and where they need to be seen to be playing in order to progress them as individuals, but also taking into consideration our needs as a club and also the district under 18s as well. So both of them will be available for selection for us. And looking back at the Newton Stewart game down there, that's probably our most disappointing performance. And I think that's what's driving the players on to this. The training has been really key in a couple of elements which we drew from that game. We have looked at particular areas around about the contact and the breakdown over the last couple of weeks, which will improve our attack, but also significantly negate their defensive strengths around the turnover ball. But I feel we've got a much better balance to our game now than that last game. It allows us to apply a different type of pressure to Newton Stewart, but we're acutely aware that we need to perform, and a 5% drop off in our standards will give them an opportunity to take us out. It may even take us, provide that real spark to their season as they run in, and give us a jolt as well. So yeah, we're obviously not looking for that. We're looking for a positive response to a break, which I'm confident we will get from this group of players. They're all focused on what their individual roles are, what their unit roles are, and ultimately what the team goals are. So yeah, I've got a pretty good bunch of guys there that are all pushing in the same direction, pulling in the same direction when need be, and we're ready to go for Saturday. I think it'll be a really tight game initially, and I'm hoping that it'll be the tipping point, usually around about that sort of 55-minute mark, as a lot of these games in the top teams are playing, is about that sort of time of the game where there's a tipping point somewhere, and something will happen in that game to maybe tip it to one side or the other. And I'm confident that our guys will be pushing that weight towards us, and we'll get the positive result that we're looking for.
Well, before we discuss that match, let's also hear from the Newton Stewart camp and their coach Martin Wallace.
We're looking forward to getting the season back underway after the Christmas break. We're obviously sitting third in the league, and Peebles are sitting right at the top of the pile at the moment with a game in hand on us. So we know it's really important to try and get results at the Gates. Something that we have never managed to do, so we obviously realise the task ahead of us is pretty big. We had a bit of success when we played Peebles at home earlier in the season. I think probably the difference that day we were pretty clinical when we got our chances, and Peebles maybe just weren't quite at the races that day. They made a lot of entries into our 22 and came away with not a lot, but we know at home they're going to be very formidable. We know what to expect. There'll be a hard, abrasive pack. They'll look to put us into corners, look to dominate us at set piece. So we really need to bring something different to the game on Saturday. We'll try and play as much rugby as we can. The weather forecast is looking good, and both teams like to play a bit of rugby, so thoroughly looking forward to it.
As we are as well. We'll be live from the Gates from 1:30 on Saturday on Rugby Radio. You and Sam Matthews in the commentary box for a 3 o'clock kick-off there. There'll be a long build-up to that game on Saturday, but hopefully we'll be able to keep you in the loop on the many 2 o'clock kick-offs happening around the country, including, of course, Currie against Hawick, as we mentioned. Berwick are playing against Aberdeen Grammar. More on that in a short while. But that's a 3 o'clock kick-off for Newton Stewart at the Gates against Peebles. Newton Stewart won the match at Bladnoch Park, which you watched, I think, didn't you, Dale? And this time it's at Peebles, and that's a much bigger challenge for them.
Yeah, I did watch that game. It was a weekend I was meant to be elsewhere covering a game, and it got called off because of the frost, and I ended up going to Peebles Rugby Club actually and watching the stream live at the rugby club, which was actually quite good. It was enjoyable. It was slightly different to kind of taking a game of rugby, but the game as a whole, it was a bit pedestrian from Peebles at times. You know, I think the pitch and the conditions certainly played a part in that fixture. The grass was really long, and I just think that Peebles were just a little bit sloppy in that game, and little mistakes as well. There was little key moments in that game where Newton Stewart just took advantage, and you know, it's interesting listening to Graham Patterson there. He knows that a 5% drop in their performance perhaps allows Newton Stewart a chance to get something from this game, and you know, every game now for Peebles is almost a cup final. But you know, I think one interesting thing that was mentioned there from Graham on numerous occasions as well is their intentions. I thought that was really honest and fresh to hear a coach pretty much break down all the barriers and just say, look, we want to go up. We are top of the pile. We hold the cards. And it almost puts a bit of pressure back on Peebles as well, because they know they go into this as favourites, but there's a lot on the line if it doesn't go their way. But just a lot of nice, refreshing things coming from that, which is nice to hear. especially about like the development of younger players and, you know, agreements about their development, but also what they can contribute to that team for that performance. So I think Peebles do find themselves in a good spot. A lot of pressure on them this weekend. Newton Stewart are a difficult opponent who are finding a decent bit of form as well. So this isn't a nailed-on Peebles victory. You know, you would imagine home advantage will count, but, you know, it's a victory that Peebles need to get to make sure that if they want to get into National 1, this is one of the steps in the ladder.
We've seen a lot of teams who have kind of bottled it when they get to the top of the table, and they go into big matches like this, and they haven't got their heads right. But this season, I must admit, I think Peebles have got the right attitude.
I think there's been like a wholesale change in that club, I think, in terms of the personnel. You know, the bottlers like me have left. There's something quite refreshing about a good batch of young players coming through because they don't bear the scars or the pressure of what has gone before them. Peebles probably, from my experience, I think when they've got themselves in a position, apart from one occasion, I think, when they've got themselves in a position that they can push on, because they don't come around too often for the club, I do think they almost see it home more often than not. But it's sometimes just due to ambition of the club. Like I do remember when they split the leagues into that funny top 8, middle 8, bottom 8. You know, we were probably a couple of players shy of getting into the Premiership, and the club itself at the time didn't back it. We had a couple of really good head coaches in at the time. I think Parker was our head coach, and Jenny McGuinness was assistant coach, and we had some good imports, but at the time we just wanted another couple of players just to fill the gap. They probably needed me out the team. So, but then it just wasn't backed, and we kind of fell away a little bit. You know, that was a time where I think Gala managed to get in the Premiership as well, and then went on to great things. So it's different now. I think you need to nurture your own players, and I think that's when it comes back to speaking about those young individuals, what they need for their own development, but also the wider picture in terms of where they can go as rugby players, not looking just to keep them for your own and try and nurture them and starve them of any opportunity. It's a really progressive nature about Graham, because he's always had a keen eye on trying to develop players and not for his own benefit, because you look after them, they might want to stay, and if they don't, at least you've got a big input in terms of, you know, where they can travel as an individual. So yeah, it's slightly different. I think people they'll go into this feeling a little bit of pressure, but you know, sometimes with these young players as well, with a little bit of pressure, you come out shining, and that could be what happens this weekend. It could be the complete other way, but you know, I'm not going to be. I'll be covering the game, and I'll be as impartial as I can be. You know, there's no guise about it. I'm a Peebles fan, and I have been all my life. Would I like to see Peebles win this weekend? Yes. Would I like to see Newton Stewart win? If they win and they're the best team on the day, then well done to them. But you know, it's one of those interesting games that has various dynamics to it, which makes this league as well so intriguing at this stage. This is almost like what National 1 was like the last few years.
Of course, what's interesting is that Peebles were supposed to be playing Selkirk in the Border League match last Saturday, and of course that was called off as well, to the relief of maybe a few Peebles fans as well, because they didn't have any injuries. I mean, that's a positive to look at, but of course, as a plus, they would have preferred to have played a match going into this.
When I heard that game was called off, I probably was thinking more like the former that you said there. Like, I just think there was a bit of relief there. Like, Selkirk are a Premiership club, and although they're not playing well this year in terms of their league position, they've beaten and competed against some of the best teams in the country. Now, Peebles are having a really good season, but they're not at the level of Selkirk yet. They don't have that squad depth. It would be great to challenge them and see where they are, but you know, I think that for that game being called off, it could be a blessing in disguise, because these young players and that squad itself can go in it pretty refreshed. You heard Graham say that, the fact that it's pretty much fully fit. For me, I'm not involved too much with Peebles. I'm a fan now. I think that it's probably a blessing in disguise that they weren't competing against a Premiership team last weekend.
Okay, the league table then in National 2, Peebles at the top, 55 points. Falkirk have 51 in second. They've both played 13 games. Newton Stewart in third on 50, playing 14 games. And then Lasswade and Gordonians, who have only played 12 matches. They're on 44 and 36 respectively. Stewart's Melville 27, Kirkcaldy 25, Stirling County 22, and the big battle at the bottom, Berwick 15, Aberdeen Grammar 15. Berwick have a game in hand there. So let's talk about that one. A tasty looking match at Scremerston at the bottom of the table. Aberdeen will not be wanting a third straight drop after being in the Premiership a few seasons ago, while Berwick of course certainly don't want to be playing third division rugby next season. Here's Berwick's forwards coach Paul Pringle.
So this Saturday we'll welcome Aberdeen down to Scremerston in what will be a must-win match for us. Before I go into that though, just looking back at the end of last year, so the Newton Stewart was the last league game we had before the breakup. Really positive game for us. Unfortunately, you know, we lost by a slender margin once again this season. But at the same time, the performance the lads put in was really encouraging. I thought our attitude was great. Jack Webster at 10 possibly had the best game we've seen for quite some time. He controlled the match really well, and his kicking was just exactly at the sort of level that we've come to expect from Jack in the past. So it was great to see him return to form. And other lads really stood up. It's a really tough place to go, Newton Stewart. It's a long bus journey. They're always strong at home, but we fronted up really well. The attitude and the positivity that came from the guys was great. So really, we just want to build on that and take that in. One of the things I've said to the guys is really about we're in a bit of trouble at the foot of the table, but if the worst happens and we actually went down, I'd rather we go down playing our own brand of rugby and enjoying it than clamming up under the pressure and playing negative rugby. So they definitely embraced that, and that's what they done. So we would be expecting the same coming this Saturday against Aberdeen. In terms of team selection this week, we unfortunately in that game we lost Darren Goodfellow to a bad ankle injury, and also Adam Hardy, our scrum half, to a fractured ankle. So that's kind of our two first choice scrum halves are out, but we've brought Liam Robson in at 9, and there's also Elliot Gray we've been working with. So both guys are really pushing hard for the jersey, and one of those will start on Saturday, and I'm sure whichever one it is will do us a good job. Darren Goodfellow as well, he's going to be out, but at the same time we were lucky enough that Jordan Patterson's just came back from a couple of months out with a bad knee injury. So Jordan will go straight into the team for this week. He's looked really sharp at training. He's been doing all the fitness work as well. So it's a great boost for the team, and hopefully we'll get Darren back in time for the Kirkcaldy match. We're fortunate enough this week to have the Thompson brothers back from Kelso for the week. So Ewan will definitely be involved. Ewan brings great energy and line speed and drive and determination. So I think that'll be a real welcome addition to us. James will come straight in at 13. We've all seen James on the circuit. He's a very, very dangerous player with ball in hand, and he just controls the game well. He can slot in there and help Webby at 10 as well. And plus, he's very good at bringing our real strong players like Jack Dalrymple and Aidan Rosie into the game and creating opportunities for them. So by and large, we're really happy with the squad this week. Another training night tomorrow night where we'll finalise just the selections, and then really it's just everything focused on Saturday. We're taking one game at a time. We've got 4 big home games coming in the last 6. In my view, they're all very winnable, especially with our record at home. So that's the target: win the 4 home games, and the rest will take care of itself. So yeah, new year, and just looking forward to getting that first game at Screm, and hopefully get some points on the board and get a bit of a distance between ourselves and Aberdeen.
Well, Neil Hinnigan will be at Scrimmerston for us on Saturday. It's going to be a nervy affair for sure. Aberdeen buoyant after that unexpected home win over Newton Stewart, but Berwick have the home advantage, and they haven't had the best of luck this season. Maybe this is one where they'll squeeze a win.
This is one of those games where you probably start to neglect the forms and the games that have gone before them, because it's just going to be a ding-dong battle. It's going to be a slugfest at Scremerston, because both sides will just be doing anything to try and get the victory, and with that brings a lot of nerves to the collective of a team, and also individuals, the coaching staff, and also spectators as well. So, home advantage. If Berwick get off to a really good start, especially with the travel that obviously Aberdeen have to go through, if Berwick can get off to a good start, it could be one-way traffic, and especially when you're at Scremerston and you get a big crowd and the club get behind you, you get that little injection of energy. But if Aberdeen can come down and get on the back of that confidence that they got from the victory against Newton Stewart, then they can certainly potentially go back up the road with a huge victory, which would and I know Paul Pringle has said there about if worst comes to the worst, if they go down, at least they've gone down playing their brand of rugby. I don't really believe that. I just think that you don't want to go down, and they'll be quite happy to stray. And if I was a player, playing for that squad, I'd be quite happy to stray from my brand of rugby if I thought that I was going to be able to get a victory. So that's what's going to come down to. There's a bit of leadership, there's a bit of game management going to be going on Saturday, because these these teams haven't been afforded that opportunity this year. They've not been able to control games and dictate how the narrative of that game's played out. So whoever can kind of grasp the nettle quicker in this game could potentially get on top, and it'll be quite hard to cope them back the other way. So yeah, huge game at the bottom of the table.
Other games in National 2 include Gordonians against Lasswade, that's 5th against 4th, and Kirkcaldy v Stirling County, 7th against 8th. Here's Stirling boss Craig Deacons.
So we're off to Beveridge Park this weekend to play Kirkcaldy. There's no beating around the bush. It was a relegation battle as far as I'm concerned. I know they're a couple of points above us. We've got a couple of games in hand, but it's irrelevant, to be honest. It's going to be a tough game to go and play, and it's one that we know that we need to go and win it. When you just look at some of the results that have happened there this year, I think Falkirk went across there and got a narrow victory, 31 points to 28. So look at some of the results that they've been putting in this year, home and away Kirkcaldy. So they've had some really close, narrow games. So we know what to expect with them. We played them earlier in the season. We got a good win against them at Stirling County. But at the same time, they pushed us all the way. They got some really good scores. So we know what to expect from them. However, the thing for me is we've been training really well. We're changing a few things this weekend to play against them. For me, we know we need to go out and deliver. We've got 6 games coming up to finish the season off. So there's plenty of scope there for picking up points. However, for me, it's a relegation battle we're in. We're just going to take every week as it comes. We're looking to take away maximum points as much as possible from every single game. But I'm saying to our players though, we need to be putting in a performance for 80 minutes. We need to stay in the fight. We need to stay in the hunt. Iron out the things that haven't been going well for us. There's just been small margins at win and lose games for us at the moment, which has been quite frustrating. But we're kind of hoping that this weekend we can go to Beveridge Park and put in a performance. We know what we want to take away from the game. For us, it's up for us to go out there and take it.
So, 2 interesting games in all. Kirkcaldy against Stirling, very close, 7th against 8th. Gordonians 5th against Lasswade's 4th. He's calling it a relegation battle, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be calling it a relegation battle. I think something quite monumental would have to happen for either of those sides to realistically have any chance of going down, because, as I say, at the bottom of a league, points are often at a premium, and although there's some games there's still a lot of games to be played at the bottom of a table, but you're reliant on Berwick and Aberdeen Grammar picking up a few victories on the road, and Stirling and Kirkcaldy not getting any points for the rest of the season. So yes, it looks like on the table there's 7 points is the gap, but you've almost got a 2-game turnaround there. Now Aberdeen and Berwick have won 3 games between them all season, so it's going to be a bit of a shift, but I think it obviously highlights the importance of this game for these teams. They find themselves in a position that they probably at the beginning of the season didn't want to be in, or didn't even visualise that they were going to be in. So they want to try and get out of that situation and probably put a few positives on their season towards the end, because there's still a bit of rugby to be played in National 2 with all the call-offs that's been going on. But certainly Stirling County probably didn't envisage that they were going to be third bottom at this stage of the season.
And Gordonians Lasswade, I mean, these were 2 clubs who were really competitive at the front end of the season. It doesn't seem to be happening for them at the moment. They do have those games in hand, of course, but even still, it's you don't really put them in the favourites for promotion bracket.
Do you want me to be impartial, or do you want me to tell you this as a Peebles fan? Because I'll do the impartial bit first. In terms of, it's a big game, probably more for Lasswade. They need to get the victory because they narrowly got defeated by Peebles, who got a bit of a revenge after Lasswade beat them at the Gates. And, depending on how results go this weekend, a victory for Lasswade can see them back in a promotion push, because, there's a lot of big games at the top of the table in National 2. The slant of it from a Peebles point of view is that if there's a Gordonians victory in there, you can pretty much write them both off. And you can say that, if results go the way that in Peebles' favour, it's going to be a shootout again. We're starting to narrow down all the teams and all the divisions to a couple of, as we'll go on in National 3. But you could say if results go a certain way this weekend, we could be looking at Peebles and Falkirk as the 2 sides going to be battling it out.
And Peebles, of course, have already done the double over Falkirk.
Yeah, they have, and I think that's been a fortunate run of results for them. In this division, it's probably highlighted the strengths of Peebles and the weaknesses of Falkirk, because the other teams that Falkirk have played, when they play that expansive, quick rugby and get their backs firing, they could probably defeat any team in that division. But when they start getting into a little bit of an arm wrestle with some attritional forwards, Peebles are quite... Them and Lasswade, Peebles, I think, at the moment, more so. They've just got more of an all-round squad, an all-round game. So that's been why Peebles have done the double. But, talk about those two games. Obviously Gordonians at home, it's a tricky game for last week to go and travel there and try and pick up the victory. But again, a lot of big games in National 2 this weekend.
The other game in National 2 is Stuart's Melville versus Falkirk. Let's hear from Stuart's Melville's coach, Alex Haggart.
Finished off the year really well against Stirling. I think the boys were absolutely delighted with how we played. We were pretty ruthless, showed loads of variation in terms of our play, which is really nice. And it was also a nice bit of momentum building after the week against Currie previously. Although we know the huge challenge that we've got ahead of us this week against Falkirk, I think I waxed lyrical about them before we played them. Back in November, and the same still stands now. And actually they showed completely and utterly why we'd wax lyrical. I mean, they absolutely destroyed us in every single department. I think it's probably, as the time I've been a coach, like the most comprehensively we've been beaten. I think the key thing for us, and it was the same attitude that we've had in a couple of rounds or a couple of games in the second round, is just going out and proving to ourselves that we can be better than that first showing. And I think if we can do that, I think the boys will be really pleased. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. It'll be nice to get back to it. 4 or 5 games left to go. Still not quite out of the woods yet, but we're very much aware that a couple of performances could get us there. So we're looking to really put those in over the next few weeks.
Alex Haggart's head coach, and they've been very, very good at home this season. And you've always talked about, at length in fact, about the importance of winning your home games.
Yes, I think so. And in leagues, you do have to try and start the campaign with the mantra that you're going to be difficult to beat at home, and if you can pick up points away from home, you can find yourself in a favourable position. And Stuart's Melville have put in better performances at home than they have away. So I think that we've just alluded to how big the games are in National 2 this weekend, and I think this is a tricky game for Falkirk to go into against Stuart's Melville with the pitch that they're going to be playing on. It might suit Falkirk a little bit more than it will Stuart's Melville. I think that I've mentioned it before about the backs that Falkirk have. If they're able to open up that pitch and spread the ball wide, I think that they could find a lot of joy at the weekend. So it's going to be a difficult game. It's a challenging game for Falkirk to stay in the hunt for promotion, but I think that obviously they go into that game with the pitch in mind and the position of the table. I think they probably go into that game as favourites.
52-10 it was last time at Sunnyside, so certainly Strumel looking for a better performance in that one. Let's go into National 3 then, and here's the table as it stands at the moment. Preston Lodge at the top, played 13, 59 points. Orkney played 12, 52. Then Allen Glens, who have played 13, 48 points. Howe 5, 47, with 14 games under their belt now. Hillhead Jordan Hill 41, Buttermuir 35, Dumfries 22, West of Scotland 20, Cartha Queen's Park 14, and Hamilton still without a win after 12 matches played. They have 10 points. So this week it's Cartha Queen's Park against Dumfries, that's 9th against 7th, Howe 5 v Buttermuir, 4th v 6th, Orkney against Hamilton, 2nd against 10th, Preston Lodge against Hillhead Jordan Hill, 1st against 5th, and West of Scotland versus Allen Glens, 8th against 3rd.
You're certainly looking at Hamilton. They're away from home against another team that you're looking at is Orkney. That's going to be a really tricky game for Hamilton to go away with any points, but Orkney need a win. They need to stay in the hunt as well. So the other two teams that I think I'm looking at in this league is PL. They've got a really interesting game at home to Hillhead Jordan Hill. They're mid-table, but Preston Lodge at home will be going at that as favourites to maintain their position at the top of the table. And then the other one there, Cartha Queen's Park. They've got a home game against Dumfries, who aren't too far away in the table, but Cartha Queen's Park know that they're in a relegation battle, and they'd be hoping to try and make their home form count this weekend against a team who is close to them in the league table, because you're assuming on the balance of the fixtures that you've got there that Hamilton, they're not going to be getting back over the water with many points, because Orkney are in real good form. But stranger things have happened, but I'm thinking about Cartha Queen's Park and Hamilton down the bottom, and also the fortunes of Orkney and Preston Lodge at the top.
National 4, the table looks like this. Garnock unbeaten, one of just 2 teams left unbeaten, Ayr being the other. Garnock played 11, won 11, 54 points at the top. Strathmore, who've played a game more than them, are on 46. Whitecraig's also on 46. North Berwick, 37 points. They were docked 3 early in the season, but it doesn't seem to have made much difference difference in the table. Stuart 35, Dunfermline 32, Greenock Wanderers 24, Perthshire 22, Murrayfield Wanderers 20, and Ross High have 11 points at the bottom of the table. So the fixtures this week: Dunfermline against White Craigs, 6th against 3rd there. Murrayfield against Greenock, the Wanderers battle, 9th against 7th there. North Berwick versus Garnock, 4th against 1st. Perthshire v Strathmore, 8th against 2nd, and Stuartry against Ross High, obviously postponed following the incredibly sad death of Ross High's captain Aidan Hoydingman following a medical emergency this week. And of course our thoughts go out to the family and friends of Aidan and all at Ross High Club at this incredibly sad time.
Yeah, I did see that on social media, and it is incredibly sad. And obviously it was nice to read the input that one individual is given to that club. So obviously he's going to be a huge loss to that club. And it is, again, it's at times like these you see the rugby community kind of rally round and send out their condolences to like-minded people. And that's one of the great things about the rugby community, but it's obviously a very sad time, so rightfully so. That game's obviously postponed, but there is still some rugby to go ahead, and I think Garnock are obviously one of the teams who they're away from home against North Berwick this weekend, but they'll be hoping to try and maintain that unbeaten start and their rampage towards National 3. But I'm pretty sure most of the clubs that are playing this week in National 4, they'll obviously have the thoughts of Aidan on their minds as they approach the games this weekend.
Well, we shall be back on Saturday at 1:30 on Rugby Radio, but from Dale Clancy and myself, bye for now.